The Cartoonerific podcast is sponsored by the wonderful World of Animation Gallery, home of rare and wonderful fine animation art. Visit their website at wwagallery.com. And for our Cartoonerific listeners, you will receive a special 10% discount off any purchase if you purchase by March 25th, 2024. Just go to wwagallery.com and enter code CARTOON10 for your 10% discount. Once again, this discount is only valid until midnight, March 25th, 2024. Once again, visit wwagallery.com.
The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
It's Cartoonerific. Cartoonerific. It's Cartoonerific. The show that talks with writers, animators, and voice actors. From rough to clean, extremes to everything in between. It's Cartoonerific. Cartoonerific. It's Cartoonerific. With your host, Brian Mitchell.
Well, welcome to the very first episode of the Cartoonerific Classic Animated Cartoon Podcast. My name is Brian Mitchell, and I'm your host. I'm an animator, storyboard artist, director. I've worked in just about every category in the animation business, with the exception of background painter. I've worked on a lot of cartoons for Warner Brothers, done some stuff for Disney, Don Bluth, Hanna-Barbera, and many, many others. I was a storyboard artist and designer, worked on the original Animaniacs and Tiny Toons series, and then also worked on Mighty Mouse: The New Adventures for Ralph Bakshi, and the Spooktacular Adventures of Casper the Friendly Ghost, which was a series done in the 90s. What is Cartoonerific? You're probably scratching your head. What the heck is this all about? Well, Cartoonerific is basically a celebration of all things hand animated. So today there's been a lot of computer or 3D animation, whatever you want to call it, and that's made major inroads. I love some of the stuff that's coming out. I think some of the features that have come out over the last couple of years have been really wonderful. But I still have a big fondness for hand-drawn animated cartoons. I love to animate. I love to storyboard. I love to put together an entire cartoon. So here at Cartoonerific, you can go to our website, or you can come to listen to these podcasts. We're going to be talking about old animation. We're going to be talking about recent animation and animation to come in the future. And the reason why this exists is because I think that hand-drawn animation should be around a lot more than it is. At Cartoonerific, we're going to be producing our own animated cartoons, and maybe we won't have one up every week, but we'll have them up every so often, and eventually we'll have a whole bunch of them that you'll be able to view online. We're working on some now, and we'll be working on some others down the line. We plan on premiering these cartoons from the Cartoonerific Studio sometime in the fall. When I grew up, I'm a 60s kid. I grew up in the 1960s in Brooklyn, New York. At that time, you only had we only had maybe about 7 television stations in New York, which includes a PBS station. We had ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was basically 2, 4, and 7. And then you had some local stations. We had Channel 5, Channel 9, and Channel 11. And then the PBS station was Channel 13. Most of the animation that was out there was on the local stations. And, of course, we had Saturday morning TV, and then Sunday morning CBS used to run some stuff like Tom and Jerry. The original Tom and Jerry's from MGM. During the week, the local stations had all these old bits and pieces of animation from the Fleischer Studio, from Terry Toons. They had all the pre-1947 Warner Brothers cartoons, which included some Bugs Bunnies, Daffy Ducks, Porky Pigs, etc. And maybe a Roadrunner was thrown in there. What happened was some of the big movie studios like Paramount and Warner Brothers sold off the catalog of their older cartoons to television for a quick buck. And stations, they bought the cartoons to be shown on their stations. It was good filler material, kept the kids busy. It was kind of a cheap way of getting programming. So we used to see all the old black and white cartoons and all the old color cartoons. And at that time, Hanna-Barbera was actually doing brand new cartoons, which were very limited in animation, but they were kind of fun. And those cartoons ended up being syndicated to local stations around the country. In New York, we had our fair share of Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound, Pixie and Dixie, Magilla Gorilla, stuff like that. And, of course, the Flintstones. I ended up watching all this animation and was very much influenced by it. We had local shows here that were on Channel 5, and on Channel 11 we had the Popeye Show. And the Popeye Show was hosted by Captain Jack McCarthy, who I believe was, he had other functions over at WPIX, Channel 11. But one of his functions was he was the host of the show. And he would come out and he would talk about, I remember him talking about Montauk, New York, which is on the end of Long Island, where there's a big lighthouse, and it's a very beachy community. But anyway, he would talk fondly about that in between the cartoons. There were other hosts. There was a show here called Wonderama, which originally was, I believe it was either Sandy Becker or Sonny Fox, who were the hosts. And they used to put Warner Brothers cartoons in between the segments. That was a long show. I think it was over 3 hours. And that show used to be on Sunday. But there were other shows during the week. And these hosts would, they'd come on and they would kibitz a little bit and then, do some fun stuff for the kids. And then they would show cartoons. I got most of this influence from because I was constantly exposed to Fleischer and Hanna-Barbera and Warner Brothers cartoons. And then, of course, Saturday morning, basically, Warner Brothers had their own show, and it was all the cartoons after 1947 up to that point, and to 1963, and so they had all the newer Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner cartoons, so they were running that. Walter Lantz had the Woody Woodpecker Show, which would have behind-the-scenes segments on how to make an animated cartoon, which was a very interesting. And Disney never sold his library to television. Disney had his own show, and originally it was called Disneyland because it was basically put on the air on ABC to promote Disneyland. But eventually, after Disneyland opened, they changed the name to Walt Disney Presents. And on that show is basically the same show that became The Wonderful World of Disney. It moved later on to NBC and became The Wonderful World of Color. The reason why it was The Wonderful World of Color was because NBC was owned by RCA, which made color TVs. So it was in their best interest to promote color television. And that's where Disney came in. What's more colorful than a cartoon? Disney used to run a lot of old cartoons. They would take cartoons and they'd put them together in an hour format with some bridging material, new animation, and then they would run that on the Sunday night television show. So I was exposed to all that. Let me tell you, I loved it. And I know a lot of people loved Saturday mornings. They loved the Disney TV show. But like I said, I was constantly exposed to animation, and it definitely influenced me. I ended up becoming, I knew at the age of 5 that I wanted to be an animation artist. I wanted to work in the world of animation. So I have this love for hand-drawn animation. Like I said, I love the computer animation that's out there, but I think some of these films are really wonderful. But I still have this great fondness for hand-drawn animation. I think it's very expressive. When it's done right, it's absolutely wonderful. So that's what Cartoonerific is all about. It's basically this wonderful celebration of these beautiful films, and also a hope that we can do some new things in the future using this unique medium. We're going to have a bunch of different guests on over the next couple of months. This podcast is going to be uploaded weekly on Fridays. So it's going to be early Friday morning, basically at 12 midnight Thursday night. You will have a brand new podcast. If you can't wait and you just got to get over and listen to good old Brian here, just on Friday morning, you can listen to the Cartoonerific podcast. We have some very, very good guests coming up. One of those guests is Matt Bates, who is an animator. He's a character designer, very talented guy. He's going to be on our second podcast, and he's actually going to be on our third and fourth as well, because it was a long interview. But in the weeks coming, we're going to have author Rick Goldschmidt. He's basically the man when it comes to the world of Rankin Bass, and he wrote a book called The Enchanted World of Rankin Bass. We're going to have him on in a couple of weeks, and we have a whole lineup of different people coming. We'll let you know who those people will be as we move forward. Anyway, we'll be back after this message. Don't go away.
Cartoonerific is the place to be to celebrate hand-drawn animated cartoons. The Cartoonerific podcast features interviews with the magic makers behind your favorite animated cartoons, with episodes uploaded every Friday. Or visit the Cartoonerific blog featuring articles about classic cartoon animation. At the Cartoonerific Gallery, view original animation art and memorabilia from your favorite animated films and TV shows. The company store features exclusive swag from the Cartoonerific universe. And coming soon, brand new world premiere cartoons on the Cartoonerific channel. It's all here. Join the fun at www.cartoonerific.com. That's cartoon, ERIFIC.com. It's Cartoonerific, saving the universe one funny cartoon at a time.
Oh yeah, this is Brian Mitchell, and you're listening to the Cartoonerific Classic Animated Cartoons podcast. Thanks for joining us. You know, years ago, back in the Stone Age, there were no books on cartoon animation. It was very hard to find anything. You might find something in the encyclopedia, the World Book Encyclopedia. You might find a book, maybe a book about Sleeping Beauty, like Walt Disney's Art of Animation book from 1959. There was a book that was produced by Walter Foster Art Books back in the 50s, which showed how to do the construction for Disney and MGM style characters, even Warner Brothers style characters. The book was called Cartoon Animation. It was by Preston Blair, and Walter Foster was the company that released it. It was maybe about a 40-page book. The original book actually had drawings of Tom and Jerry in it. They had to be taken out and basically substituted with drawings of like characters that looked like those characters, but they weren't specifically Tom and Jerry. But it had been in print for years. Eventually, there was a second book, How to Animate Animated Cartoons, and that was added back in the late 70s, which Preston Blair also authored. Those were basically the books that were available at the time. And if you wanted to learn about how your favorite Warner Brothers cartoons were done, or Terrytoon cartoons, or Walt Disney, there was a little bit out there, but MGM cartoons, there's virtually nothing out there. That didn't start happening until the 70s, somewhere in the late 70s, where articles started coming out, and then there were fanzine things. One thing that comes to mind was a fanzine called Mind Rot, which was basically printed on a Xerox machine that came out and talked about cartoons. But back then, there was, like I said, before the late 70s, there was virtually nothing. So if you want to learn about how these cartoons were done or whatever, maybe you might find something out of the World Book Encyclopedia. I remember one from, I think, 1969, 1970, World Book Encyclopedia, where they were talking about the production of a Peanuts movie, either Snoopy Come Home or a Boy Named Charlie Brown, which was produced by Bill Melendez, by his company. And so there are pictures in there of the drawings and cells and stuff like that, which was very, very, very informative, but it was only a couple of pages. But, you know, at that time, when you're trying to learn, when you're trying to find out stuff, there was just so little out there. I remember writing to Disney Studios back when I was maybe 10 or 11 about animation, and they sent me stuff in the mail. It had to be it was almost like a book in itself. All this information about how the processes were and how things worked and what an animator had to do and stuff like that. Just a thick packet of information. But other than that, there was nothing, and I had to write to them directly for that. As far as books on the Looney Tunes and MGM cartoons and stuff like that, it wasn't until the late 70s where Leonard Maltin put out a book it was called Of Mice and Magic. And it was an excellent book that really talked about all the major Hollywood studios. And when I say Hollywood studios, two of the studios that were in there were Max Fleischer's studio and Famous Studios. And another one was Terrytoons. They were New York-based studios. The rest were all in California. As a matter of fact, Walter Lance's outfit, I believe he shared office space with Bob Clampett. Bob Clampett had his studio, I think, in the same building on Seward Avenue in Hollywood. Of course, there were other studios, Filmation, Hanna-Barbera, which basically set up their own studio on Cahuenga in Hollywood, had started in the old Charlie Chaplin studio, and then moved, and they built their own studio in Los Angeles. I think that studio is now a gym. Anyway, it wasn't until there was an animation book put out about the process of creating cartoons and the Disney way, which was Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston's Disney animation, The Illusion of Life, that was put out in the very early 80s. And there was even a museum exhibit in New York, I believe at the Whitney, which was Disney Animators and Animations. Very impressive exhibit that I ended up going to see while I was a student at School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. Of course, now there's so many other books out there. Two books that you want to look at if you're an aspiring animator came out within the last 20 years. One is Richard Williams' The Animator's Survival Kit. The new edition has, it's basically updated. There's new material in there. So it's well worth getting. If you have the old one, you should probably pick up the new one as well. The other book is Eric Goldberg, who's a wonderful animator. He's been basically producing commercials in London. He ended up at Disney in the early 90s. Fantastic animator, really knows his stuff. He put out a book called Character Animation Crash Course. A really great book, very informative, fun to read. Both books are highly recommended. If you don't have Disney animation, The Illusion of Life, it's good for anybody. It's basically if you want to be an animator, you just want to learn about animation, learn how Disney animation was done, that's an excellent book to get. All those books are basically featured on our website, the Cartoonerific.com website. And you can get them through there. There's links there that will take you right through, and you can purchase it directly. One of the things that we're going to be talking about in the future is collecting animation art. Early on, when I was just an aspiring animator, a kid just learning about it at the age of 11, I had seen something on a local TV station. We had the PBS station here in New York, Channel 13, used to have auctions on air, which would support the station. And one day I was watching it, and the Disney company had donated 2 original cells from the Aristocats. And I remember them putting this thing up there. It was, of course, of the cats. They put the value as a big question mark. I remember asking my father, because I was watching this and it was like, oh my God, they have original cartoon art, and I really wanted one of those cells. When they first put it up there, I think it got a bid of maybe $10. And I was like, oh, we have to do this. We got to bid on it. Dad, please, can we bid on this? And so what we did was we called up and we bid $50 on each of those cells. Before long, the $50 showed up, but then it became $100 and it became $300 and then eventually over $1,000 each. So my dreams of getting an animation cell from the PBS Channel 13 auction were gone. But what I ended up learning years later, and not too many years later, was that these cells were available at Disneyland and Walt Disney World for about $3 a piece. Disney was testing the waters to see if there was interest in animation art. So once that auction finished, I guess Disney pulled all their animation cells, all these cells that they were selling at the parks for $3 a piece, they pulled them, and they started the Disney Art Program. So eventually, the cells from the next animated feature, Robin Hood, were now being sold in galleries. And guess what? They weren't $3 a piece anymore. They were still, at the time, a little bit pricey because it was the early 70s. They were going for between $40 and $75 a piece in the galleries. But that started off the whole animation art craze, I believe, because by the beginning of the 80s, animation art, where you could actually buy a cell used from somebody who had been to Disneyland for maybe $15, $20, $30, was now going for $100 or $200 or $300 or more. And so I ended up starting off as a collector before I actually got in as an animator, working at different studios. Kind of interesting. In future episodes, we'll be talking about theme parks and how hand-drawn animation has influenced those over the years, especially the Disney parks. We're also going to talk about new television shows, new movies, and we're going to review them and talk with people who made them. There's an excellent show called Cat Burglar, which is a very funny interactive show on Netflix. There's that and a whole lot more coming to the Cartoonerific podcast, Classic Animated Cartoons. I guess my point is hand-drawn animation is a powerful medium, and it deserves to be. We're going to produce some cartoons, and by listening to the podcast and telling other people, you'll be helping promote hand-drawn animated cartoons. Our website address is www.cartoonerific.com. We're just starting out. Things are going to grow. things are going to get better as time goes along, and we hope that you're there with us for the ride. If you want to stay up to date with all things Cartoonerific, including the podcast, all you have to do is subscribe. Go to www.cartoonerific.com. Subscribe right there. If you have any questions, go up to comments and send us a quick email. Next week, we have Matt Bates. He is an animator and designer. Really wonderful podcast coming up with him next week, so please stay tuned. This is Brian Mitchell. I hope you've had a great day. I hope you have a wonderful week, and thank you for joining us.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.